When King Thutmose II died, there was a lot of confusion at the royal palace. The king had passed away, but the throne was not empty. In fact, it was occupied by a young child, King Thutmose III, but this boy was not yet able to lead a great empire the size of Egypt. He was a child no more than a few years old who needed someone to take care of him. And so the queen, his stepmother, Hatshepsut, suddenly found herself at a very important moment in her life. Thutmose III was too young to rule, and so Hatshepsut, as his stepmother and wife of the deceased king, naturally should have taken over as regent. This meant that she would be the one to take care of the kingdom until Thutmose came of age. That was the most logical solution, but deep down, Hatshepsut wasn't satisfied with simply being a regent. She wanted much more than that. She wanted to be the one in charge. She wanted to be the ruler, not just for her stepson, but for all of Egypt. So Hatshepsut played the part of a good and caring queen, acting as regent and playing the role of a nurturing mother, saving the crown for her stepson until he grew up. But internally, far from everyone's view, she was already planning what she would do when the time was right. She was preparing to seize the throne. Hatshepsut knew that she could not do it openly because there were many rivals who would never agree to a woman ruling over them. Not to mention the priests who firmly believed that only a man could be pharaoh. So she decided to wait patiently for the perfect opportunity. Years went by and the young pharaoh Thutmose grew up under Hatshepsut's care. Meanwhile, the queen regent became more and more powerful. Little by little, she began to show that she was not just a figurehead, but a true leader. She intervened in major decisions. She also sat in on meetings with priests and ministers, giving orders and showing that she was not afraid to speak her mind. Many voices began to whisper around the palace, wondering if Hatshepsut would remain just a regent or if her ambition was greater. What would she do next? No one could say for sure. But the queen didn't have to wait long for her chance. A few years later, she announced something no one had ever dared to do before. Hatshepsut declared herself Pharaoh of Egypt. With that, she was no longer just a queen. She was now the sole ruler of the empire. It was a truly shocking decision. At that time, the idea of a woman sitting on the throne of the pharaohs was unthinkable. The priests were divided, the nobles were silent, and the people were astonished. But Hatshepsut was too clever to face such a strong opposition. She did not rely on force to impose herself. Instead, she used her intelligence to gain the acceptance of the Egyptians. The first thing she did was to rewrite her image. For everyone to see, she put on the pharaoh's crown, carried the scepter, and even wore the royal beard, a symbol of absolute power. The images and inscriptions in the temples showed her as a complete pharaoh, no different from men. She posed as a powerful ruler with all the symbols of authority, but she did not stop there. Hatshepsut went even further and declared that she was the successor of the god Amun, the supreme deity of the Egyptian pantheon. She said that her rule was divine and that she was the chosen one to restore stability to Egypt after the death of Tutu. This declaration was very important because at that time, the legitimacy of a ruler depended directly on his link to the gods. If the pharaoh was considered the son of Ra, Horus, or Amun, then his rule was justified. If not, he ran the risk of being seen as a usurper, and Hatshepsut knew that very well. She knew that to gain the acceptance of her subjects, she had to link her rule directly to the gods, and that's exactly what she did. She declared that her stepson, Thutmose III, was not capable of ruling the empire and that she was the only one who could do it. And to justify herself, she said that it was the will of the gods. But how did she manage to convince the priests and the population that she was the true pharaoh? The answer lies in her political intelligence. Hatshepsut was a clever politician who knew how to play the game of power very well. She knew how to make alliances, how to win over hearts and minds, and how to get the support of the most influential people in the country. She was not afraid to make decisions that others would fear to take. She knew how to reward those who supported her and punish those who opposed her. Above all, she was a master of propaganda. She knew how to use the symbols of power, the images and inscriptions, to create a new image of herself as the true Pharaoh of Egypt. Her propaganda was very effective. Soon everyone began to accept her as the legitimate ruler of Egypt. The ministers realized that despite being a woman, Hatshepsut was a strong and capable leader who knew how to make decisions quickly and efficiently. They also noticed that Egypt continued to be strong and prosperous under her rule. The priests saw in Hatshepsut a defender of the true faith, someone who respected and supported their religious battles. The people admired her for her intelligence, her strength, and her ability to maintain order and security throughout the empire. One of Hatshepsut's greatest achievements was her successful military campaign against the kingdom of Nubia. There she captured important cities and obtained precious goods that contributed to the wealth of Egypt. The booty from the Nubian campaign was so great that Hatshepsut decided to hold a magnificent festival in Karnak Temple in honor of the gods. During the celebration, she made offerings of gold, silver, and precious stones to the most important temples in Egypt. Hatshepsut's propaganda machine was at its best during the festival. Every temple wall was covered with images and inscriptions that extolled her victories and her divinity. The queen was portrayed as a warrior, a builder, and a divine monarch. Everything seemed to indicate that Hatshepsut had achieved the ultimate success. She had become the undisputed ruler of Egypt, but Hatshepsut's reign was not all sunshine and roses. Although most Egyptians accepted her as the true pharaoh, there were still some voices that questioned her legitimacy. The main opponents were the priests of the city of Thebes, who refused to recognize Hatshepsut's divinity and continued to demand that Thutmose III be restored to power. The situation became so tense that Hatshepsut had to send troops to Thebes to put down the rebellion. The military operation was successful, and the priests who opposed her were either exiled or put to death. However, the episode showed that Hatshepsut could not fully trust her subjects. She always had to be prepared to defend her power, no matter how strong it seemed. In spite of everything, Hatshepsut continued to rule with an iron fist. She did not allow anyone to question her authority or challenge her divine right to rule. She also continued to pursue her ambitious building projects, leaving behind a legacy of impressive monuments and works of art. One of her most famous works was the construction of a new temple complex in Deir el-Bahari. The complex included a mortuary temple, a colonnaded courtyard, a series of underground galleries, and a series of gardens and terraces overlooking the Nile River. The temple was decorated with beautiful reliefs and paintings that depicted scenes from Hatshepsut's reign, including her military campaigns and her building projects. Another of Hatshepsut's great works was the construction of a series of obelisks and statues in her own image. The obelisks were tall, four-sided monuments that were erected in honor of the sun god Ra. Hatshepsut's obelisks were particularly impressive because of their size and their intricate carvings. One of the most famous obelisks is the one that stands today in the Place de la Concorde in Paris. The statue of Hatshepsut was another important part of her propaganda campaign. She was depicted as a strong and majestic ruler wearing the traditional pharaoh-esque garments and holding the symbols of power. Some of Hatshepsut's statues are still preserved in museums around the world, including the British Museum in London and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. In addition to her building projects, Hatshepsut was also responsible for several important administrative reforms. She established a new system of taxation and created a series of government positions to help her administer the empire. She also launched a series of economic and commercial projects that helped increase the wealth of Egypt. Hatshepsut's reign marked a period of great prosperity and stability for Egypt. Her economy flourished, her army was strong, and her people lived in relative peace and harmony. She managed to solve the problems that had plagued the country during the previous reigns and established a new era of greatness for the Egyptian Empire. Unfortunately, Hatshepsut's reign came to an end sooner than expected. She died suddenly after 22 years of ruling Egypt. The circumstances of her death are unknown, but some historians believe that she may have been assassinated by her stepson, Thutmose III, who was eager to take the throne for himself. When Hatshepsut died, Thutmose III took over as pharaoh, and he proceeded to erase all mention of his stepmother from the historical record. He destroyed her statues, defaced her images, and tried to rewrite history as if she had never existed. However, despite Thutmose III's efforts, Hatshepsut's legacy survived. Her deeds and achievements were recorded in the Bible and in the writings of ancient historians. Her story was rediscovered in the 19th century, and since then she has been recognized as one of the greatest pharaohs of all time. We can conclude that Hatshepsut was a truly exceptional woman. She was born into a time when women were not allowed to hold positions of power, but she did not let that stop her. She fought for her place in history and managed to become the first female pharaoh in Egyptian history. She was a brilliant politician, a clever strategist, a successful builder, and a religious reformer. She left behind a legacy of impressive monuments and works of art that continue to amaze us today. She was a true pioneer who opened the doors for other women to follow in her footsteps and become rulers of nations. Hatshepsut was not just an exception, she was the new rule.